Okay, good morning. My name is Lacey Clem, and I'm the Northwest Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We are pleased to have Mike Asbach, Associate Director of Information Technology, and Nick Daniels Porter, IT Support Technician, both from the East Chicago Public Library, with us today to give us a session about libraries in the age of AI, bridging technology and society. I like to start the webinar off with a few announcements. To register for other webinars and trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at library.in.gov under Services for Libraries. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, please see our continuing education website. If there is a global sound issue during the webinar, we will announce it in the chat box. If you are unable to resolve the sound issue you are experiencing, we are recording this session and you can watch it offline after the meeting has ended. Also, make sure your chat is set to everyone in the chat drop-down menu so we can see your comments and questions. As you have a question, just pop it in the chat because there will be time at the end for questions and I'll be moderating that. Today's webinar will be archived and available on the Indiana State Library's archive trainings page after it has been transcribed. This session is worth one LEU, and I will be sending out certificates and a link to this presentation later next week. Without further ado, I will now turn the presentation over to Mike and Nick.
Okay, thank you, Lacey. Good to see you. And good morning from East Chicago, Indiana. It is Indiana, believe it or not. And today we're going to be talking about libraries in the age of AI. So what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to give a brief explanation and definition of what artificial intelligence is, large language models, and generative AI. And then I'm going to turn it over to my technology assistant, Nick Daniels Porter, who is going to talk about how to use it and some of the different tools, AI tools out there and how we can use them. And then I'm going to stop talking about AI. See, technology moves pretty quick, so these tools change very fast as well. So then what I would like to talk about is I want us to try and get used to what exponential growth in technology is and how fast that really is, because it's hard for us to wrap our heads around that. So I'm going to give some examples of exponential growth and talk about how that relates to AI. Then I'm going to talk about what kind of changes artificial intelligence can bring, especially to our libraries, and how libraries are going to cope with that kind of change. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box right away. We're going to address those questions at the end, just so we can keep on time. And at the end of my presentation, then I'm going to turn it back over to Nick, who is going to give you some resources on how to keep up with the change, because it moves so fast that books and articles that we read, oftentimes when they get published, they're already a little out of date. And they even say that in the articles. I've seen articles published recently that just say, oh, yeah, well, I wrote this a week ago, and now that it's published, it's already kind of out of date. So that's how fast some of the stuff is changing. So let's talk really quick about what is artificial intelligence. We're going to talk about a couple of different kinds today. Nick's going to give you an overview of several different ones, including agents and other things. But primarily what I'm going to be talking about is a large language model. And large language models we're used to predictive text on our phones, most of us, where it guesses the right word. Well, this is like a really advanced predictive text. And we'll talk about how smart these things are becoming, because they're actually becoming somewhat intelligent on their own. But a large language model is a very large, deep learning model. It's pre-trained on a lot of data from the internet. They're a set of neural networks that have self-attention capabilities, which means that they can extract meaning from a sequence of text, and they can understand the relationships between the words and the phrases in it, which is how we use language. So it's a very advanced tool. Now, what is a neural network? A neural network, it teaches computers to process data in a way that's inspired by the human brain. Okay, it's a type of a machine learning process they call deep learning. It uses interconnected nodes, kind of like neurons, in a layered structure that resembles a human brain, and it creates an adaptive system that computers can use to learn from their mistakes and improve continuously. Okay, it's a type of machine learning based on a neural network. So early machine learning learned how to play chess. Now that it knows how to play Go, you might have seen IBM's computer beat a couple of experts on what was that game show? Can't remember the name of the game show.
I think you're talking about Jeopardy.
Jeopardy, right? Yeah. So IBM's Big Blue, I think it was, went on Jeopardy and beat handily two experts. The first answer it got was right. It was interesting because if you watch some of the videos, you can see the second and third answers that Deep Blue gave in Jeopardy, and as smart as it seemed, and it was pretty smart, the second and third answers were often very wrong, laughably wrong. But that's what a large language model is. Generative AI, that's a type of artificial intelligence that can create new content like images, music, audio, and videos. It uses machine learning to learn patterns from that type of data, images, videos, and text, to generate new context or new content based on contextual prompts. So that's just a brief definition of what artificial intelligence is. And if today is January 29th, 2025, and if you're watching this too far ahead in the future, there's going to be a fair amount of this stuff that's going to be obsolete. So right now, I'm going to turn this over to Nick, my technology assistant. And what Nick is going to do is he's going to give you an overall introduction to the different types of AI tools out there and how they can be used. And then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about exponential growth and how libraries are going to cope with that. So Nick, will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicholas Daniels Porter. I go by Nick, and I'm going to be talking to you about the AI tools that we have available right now. I'm not going to go over all of them, but just kind of a brief overview. And Mike, am I good to? Okay, so give me just one moment. All right. So again, I'm going to be talking about some of the AI tools that are available right now. As Mike mentioned, this is always changing, so take this with a grain of salt, and I'm not going over every tool. So as a brief overview, I'm going to be discussing what are AI tools, what are general purpose chatbots, and a few examples, discussing some specialized AI tools, discussing AI agents, use case summary for the library in general, and then at the end, as Mike mentioned, I'll be mentioning a few ways to stay current with trends in AI. So first, what are AI tools? So AI tools are software systems powered by artificial intelligence designed to assist or automate tasks by analyzing data, making predictions, or simulating human-like reasoning. And they can include anything in this list: automation, data analysis and prediction, natural language processing, etc. I will not be going over all of them, but all this to say that it covers a wide range of fields and it uses a wide range of tools to help accomplish what it is that it's trying to accomplish. So we're going to be talking about general purpose chatbots now. So what is a general purpose chatbot? A general purpose chatbot uses natural language. As Mike mentioned, most of these are LLMs or large language models to communicate with the user in a way that simulates a real conversation, to answer questions, provide information, and cover a wide range of topics. So I have a brief diagram here, but basically We start with input from a user, we process the language that they put in, and they retrieve the information, generate a response that the user can understand, and then the user receives that answer. So I'm sure that most of you have probably heard of ChatGPT from OpenAI. I have a couple of the models available, but there's 4.0.1 operator, which is in beta, and there will be O3 being released soon. 4.0 is kind of general purpose, and O1 and to come O3 are reasoning models. So some pros and cons. ChatGPT is obviously the most mainstream. Right now, it is the most powerful with the most features, and it's the most cutting edge. It's not specialized, and it can struggle with complex work, and it can also be expensive in its most highest tiers. There's I believe, a $200 a month subscription for the top end model, which most people do not need as of right now. The next one that's very common is Gemini by Google's DeepMind. This is something that if you work here at the Chicago Public Library has just been rolled out with our Google Workspace. Very similar to ChatGPT. The pros are that it's integrated with G Suite and Google Apps, and it does have direct integration on your phone if you have an Android smartphone and some of the smart home devices that you may have that are powered by Google. It does have some cons, but its main one is heavy censorship. This has led to things like inaccurate results, refusal to assist, and it also is less powerful than other mainstream models. You'll probably notice that Gemini cannot do a lot of the same things that other major models can do, but it is still pretty powerful. Then we have Copilot, which is Microsoft's AI tool. This has tons and tons of features and models compared to some of the other ones. It does integrate directly with the PC, Office 365, and Windows. And as I mentioned earlier, it is feature rich. The con is that Microsoft has a partnership with OpenAI, so it is heavily reliant on ChatGPT, which means that sometimes it can be slightly behind ChatGPT, or if ChatGPT is having an issue, then Copilot will have an issue as well. The good thing is that, like I said, it has that deep integration with all the Windows and Office tools. Claude by Anthropic is another cutting edge model. This model focuses on ethics and safety, and it's optimized for research and complex workflows. What you can kind of see here in this GIF or GIF that I have playing, it does have the ability to do real-time code editing and generation. So you can put in code, you can edit it, and then it'll show you what it'll look like before it's finished. So that's very useful if you're trying to build something. The cons are that compared to other models, it does have a relatively small context window. It does not have a voice mode yet, and it does not integrate with the web. What does that mean? Most of the major models now have the ability to get real-time information from the internet to assist you with your requests. Claude does not as of right now. So here are some other honorable mentions. There's Grok by XAI, which is on the X platform, social media. Llama by Meta, which is open source. Apple Intelligence, which I'm sure that most of you have seen, is on things like your iPhone, your iPad, your Mac. Galaxy AI, similar thing on Samsung phones. And many of you have probably seen this last one in the news, but DeepSeek, which is a Chinese open source model. And if you have questions about that, feel free to ask. But basically, they've been able to achieve very similar results to OpenAI, but at a fraction of the cost. So they've kind of been disrupting the AI market recently. So here are some specialized AI tools that I'm going to go over very briefly because I don't have a ton of time. The first one is Notebook LM by Google DeepMind. This summarizes and organizes research and projects. It's organized in a central location that you can reference. And the unique thing about this is you can take all of that information or just a specific document and generate a podcast to summarize that information. So it's a very unique and interesting tool in that way. Suno, which helps you to generate music, lyrics, and album art based on text prompts. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this video. to show you an example of what it can do.
A world uncharted, magical places where dreams are.
So as you can see from this prompt here, it's able to generate that music with no other assistance, including album art, and then you see that there are lyrics right there as well for it. The next one is Runway. This is an AI video editor that does have some video generation capabilities. We will come back to that and a few others. Synthesia, which can create visual presentations using AI avatars and voice. This one is pretty impressive. I want you to keep in mind that all of this is AI. None of these are real people.
Hello. We are super happy to introduce a team of new expressive avatars.
11 new avatars are already available to you.
Let me show you the team.
Look at us. We are awesome. I am here to replace Joshua.
Oh, come on. We are a team, Arthur.
Okay. Create training, customer support, or marketing videos with us.
We can show different emotions based on the script.
We can explain complex topics.
And guide your viewers.
So I'm going to move on from that just because of time.
I can't.
Hello.
All that to say
We are
that
super
you
happy
can
to
generate these AI personalities that can then be used in different projects. Then we have image generators. The most common ones are Imagine by Google DeepMind, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E 2, which is made by OpenAI. So this is the engine that is creating images in ChatGPT. And as you can see, you just type in a prompt and it'll make you a beautiful looking picture. Similar thing here with video generators. These are getting very powerful now. So Sora is kind of at the lead right now with OpenAI, but there's also VO2 and Runway. And here's a brief example of what that would look like when you're generating a video.
Generating. When your videos finish, you can hover over any of the variations to watch all of them play back in real time. For more fine-grained control, you can use your mouse to scrub over the videos and watch them play back more slowly. Clicking on a video will bring it into the lightbox, and you can use the arrow keys to see the different clips in the set.
Okay.
Generating. When your videos finish.
So next one, AI agents. AI agents are very important for now and into the future. Here's why. AI agents are the future of AI. They're efficient, they can self-improve, and they can self-replicate. So efficiency, obviously, they don't need rest and they can work at any time. Self-improvement, it can edit its own code in real time and make changes in real time. And the last one is very important, self-replication. So this means that it can create an offspring, and generally speaking, those offspring are more optimized and more powerful than the parents would be, and that cycle kind of continues. Just a brief explanation, we're aiming for AGI and ASI. You may have heard these before. AGI is artificial general intelligence, ASI is artificial super intelligence. Here are some current AI agent models that are out right now. Operator by OpenAI, which was recently released, computer use by Claude, Perplexity Assistant, which is a recent release for phones, and then Llama Nematron by NVIDIA, which is more for specialized uses. I'm just going to play a little bit of this to show you what that would look like.
Well, let's see if he figures that out. Let's see. Okay, so in this case, again, operator quickly actually recognized using GPT-4's vision capabilities to understand that the image said egg, spinach, mushroom, chicken thighs, and
So in both of these cases, you said what you want it to use. If you just say buy me these groceries and don't specify Instacart, what happens?
it will do a search, use a search engine, much like we do, and it'll find, Instacart or Gus's Directly website or whatever else is on the search engine, go through that.
So the important thing for this is that the AI is using a web browser with a mouse and keyboard on its own without any further prompts from the user. And this is very powerful and becoming more powerful. And yeah, we'll talk about that at a later point.
Well, let's see if he figures that out.
So here are some brief library use cases. You can personalize reading and research, have AI-powered workshops, library tours, storytelling, improved metadata tagging, cataloging, and library integration, and generate images and video for programming and outreach. Here are some other uses on the right here with specific models. These are just suggestions. And I will turn this back over to Mike.
All right. Thank you, Nick. That was very interesting, mildly terrifying. AI is now using the computer's mouse and just searching the web to find groceries, and that's pretty amazing. Okay, so those are some use cases. Let's talk a little bit about the speed of exponential change, because that, I think, is what is going to be affecting us the most when it comes to how our libraries are going to adjust. Our heads have a hard time wrapping exponential growth. We have a hard time wrapping our heads around exponential growth. We are good at linear growth. We are not good at exponential growth. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of exponential growth and how that works. Also, because things are changing so quick, Nick, at the end of this presentation, is going to give some resources on where you can keep up with the latest information on artificial intelligence. Because a lot of artificial intelligence, I think, is going to fall under what we already do in libraries. So in my statistics class in college, the example they used to try and understand exponential growth was the folding paper example. So say you had a piece of paper, a thin piece of paper, like a piece of Bible paper that was very thin, which is probably 0.01 centimeters thick. It's real thin paper. Now, if you fold it once, now it's 2-ply, right? It's double thick. You fold it again, it's going to be 4-ply, okay? So that's going to double it. You fold it again, it doubles it again. So the question that they asked in statistics class was, if you folded that piece of Bible paper on itself 100 times, how thick would that piece of paper be? And they went around the class and asked all of us, and we came up with wildly wrong answers, because if you fold that piece of paper 30 times, I think it's going to reach all the way to the moon. That means that if you fold it one more time and double that, it's going to reach to the moon and back. So folding that piece of paper on itself 100 times, the thickness of the paper is going to be thicker than the observable universe. It's going to be very, very large. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about exponential growth. I'm going to show you a little example I just created on a spreadsheet here. I think it's here. It's not there. I'm sorry, I'm looking for my spreadsheet. Here it is. Okay. Nick, can you see my spreadsheet? Yeah, okay, good. All right, so basically,
yes, sorry.
This is a good question for exponential growth as well. So if you had a choice between two scenarios, I could either give you $10,000 a day, every day for 30 days, or instead of $10,000 a day, every day for 30 days, I could give you a penny today, and then I could double your penny every day for 30 days. Which would you rather have? Well, it already kind of sounds like a trick question, right? So I don't expect you to answer that, but this little chart should give you an example. So after 10 days of this, if you see on the chart, you're going to add 10 days of $10,000 a day is going to bring you up to $100,000. And the doubled pennies after 10 days is only going to be $5.12. But let's increase that to 20 days. After 20 days of giving you $10,000 a day, you're going to have $200,000 in your pocket. But if you chose the penny route, you would have $5,242. Okay, so let's move that up to 26 days. Okay. So at about 26 days, you see that the penny idea is surpassing the $10,000 a day idea. All right. So after 26 days of getting $10,000 a day, you'd have $260,000. And if you had the double penny route, you'd have $335,000. So if we go double that one more time, $671,000 for the penny route. 29 days. Okay, so it's already off the chart. So after 29 days, you got $2.6 million with the penny and 290,000 with the dot. After 30 days, okay, so this is an illustration of how fast exponential growth actually grows. AI scientists and people working with AI, they have a word for this, and they call it FWOOM. And that's it's supposed to be the sound of when exponential growth really takes off, right? There's going to be a point where exponential growth just goes boom and goes at a super quick rate. Well, that's what we're dealing with. It turns out that technology, since technology can improve itself, technology can create new technology, the technology grows at an exponential rate. It means it doubles itself about every year and a half or so. Okay, we are getting to the point where our cognitive tools that we have built are starting to escape. They're starting to get to that escape velocity. And that is one of the reasons why when we're looking up new information on artificial intelligence, that a lot of the things that we read that was written a week ago is already out of date, because that's how fast it moves. Okay. So, you know, when AI first started, I would have discussions with friends who are artists and photographers, and they were very worried about their copyrighted information being used by AI to generate new information. And that is a legitimate concern. And in libraries, and librarians in particular are very knowledgeable on copyright and how that's used. But that's not really how artificial intelligence is generating images. It's learning from these images much in the same way that you and I learn from these images. So when my friend Mike, a photographer here in Northwest Indiana, talked about, well, is AI using my images? Well, learning from their images. And I don't know if it's so much of a copyright issue, because I learn from his images. I'm a hobbyist photographer. I'm not a great photographer, but when I see him taking pictures and I see pictures of his that I like, I learn from that. I learn the composition of the photograph, right? But also, I think that might be short-sighted. And when I say that, I don't want to dismiss it, but the exponential growth of technology, that seems to me like some of these early problems with AI hallucinating, or people having copyright worries about AI. I kind of think, you know, it's going to take off so quick. I think in another 10 years, that's going to be the least of our worries, really. I drive an all-electric car. I hear that from people all the time. When they hear that I drive an all-electric car, they say, oh, I hear all the time people say, I'll never drive an all-electric car. And I say, why? And they almost always say the same thing. They say, well, what if I drive someplace and I've only got 300-mile range on my battery, and then my battery goes out? Well, what do I do? You're right, that is a problem today, but with exponential growth in technology, you know, electric car is just technology. That means it's going to grow exponentially as well. So I say, yeah, that makes sense, but you'll never buy an electric car? I mean, what happens in 5 years when the range of the battery is 800 miles or 3,000 miles? Would you buy an electric car then? What's going to happen when the batteries in our electric car are small enough that that when we pull into a gas station or a charging station, they can swap out the batteries the same way we swap out batteries in like our TV remote? They don't have to sit there and charge it up. Batteries are small enough just to pop the old one out and pop the new one in. That is some technologies that they're working with right now too. So, you know, when somebody says, I'm never going to drive an electric car, when I say, well, if technology improves enough, they say, well, yeah, if I can drive all the way to California and back on one charge, maybe I will buy an electric car. So that's what I mean when I say try not to be short-sighted with some of these arguments that people are talking about AI and some of this other technology, because I think those arguments are going to be left in the dust pretty quick. And there's plenty of examples of it. I mean, when the gas car came out, you know, the people with the horse and buggy said, well, what are you going to do when you drive someplace and you run out of gas? So, and now our whole society is just wrapped around cars. So that is a little bit on exponential growth. I want us to try and get used to what that means and how fast changes in artificial intelligence is coming down the pike. So next, I want to talk about some of the changes that we're going to see, the scope of the changes that artificial intelligence is going to bring. And I want to show you a couple of articles. Okay. We're going to talk about Ray Kurzweil a fair amount today. So Ray Kurzweil is a futurist, neuroscientist, and he works with Google. I know him. I'm a musician, and Nick also is a musician. Nick has a degree in music. We know Ray Kurzweil because when I was growing up, the Kurzweil synthesizer, digital synthesizer, was one of the best digital synthesizers on the market. He worked a lot with musicians, not just music, but like he worked with Stevie Wonder on digital synthesizers, but also tools to help the blind read. He came out with a book in 1999 called The Singularity is Near. We'll talk about what that singularity is in a little bit. But so when we talk about some of the changes that AI is going to bring, so Ray Kurzweil thinks that we're all going to be living in abundance by 2030 because we're going to be getting so close to the singularity, and that so much of the work we do is going to be done by AI. It's going to make everything easier for us. This is the same argument I remember hearing growing up, when I remember hearing that, oh, with computers, once we get into the 2020s, you know, you're only going to have to work 5 hours a week because the computers are going to be doing a lot of that work for you. Well, we're all not, none of us are really working 5 hours a week anymore. What happens is we just don't have enough jobs to go around, and we're still working hard. We're getting a lot more done. But so Ray Kurzweil thinks that we're going to be living in abundance by 2030. MIT scientists just recently republished this study. They're predicting society's downfall by 2040. So I'm going to post both of these articles on Quora. I'll talk a little bit at the end of this presentation about how we can keep this conversation going, because I think that's going to be a real important thing for us to do as libraries and librarians and tech people in libraries to keep this discussion going and relevant, because I want us to be at the forefront of how some of these changes are going to happen. So MIT thinks the society's downfall is going to be by 2040. Ray Kurzweil thinks we're going to be living in abundance. Either way, I think it's going to be a wild ride. I think it's going to be interesting. It's either going to kill us or save us, I think is what it boils down to, right? Okay, so how intelligent are these models today? When these companies create new artificial intelligence systems, they go out and they hire very smart people, scientists, to sit down and ask them questions and challenge these large language models. And every once in a while, these large language models display intelligence, okay? Things that they shouldn't be able to glean just from language. Early models of ChatGPT, scientists asked it, okay, how would you balance a book, a laptop, a dozen eggs, a pop bottle, and a nail? And the early large language models just basically put things in an arbitrary order. New large language models actually reasoned it out in a logical way, saying, well, you know, I'm going to put the laptop down first because it's going to be the heaviest. Then we're going to take the eggs out of the carton and we're going to arrange the eggs in a square so it'll hold up the book. And then we'll put the pop bottle on top of the book, and then we'll put the nail on top of the pop bottle. And that is an example of a logic problem that the large language model never saw before, but gleaned only from analyzing language. Okay. And there are a lot of examples like this that freaked out scientists. I'm sure you might have heard on the news how there was a Google scientist who went public and quit Google saying, oh, this is a sentient being. I keep asking it questions and it's sentient. It knows it's alive, and it freaked it out. It freaked out the scientist and he quit. It was on the news quite a bit. There was another example of a question that scientists were like, well, if it's just trained on language, is it going to be able to understand what somebody else, what a person is thinking or seeing? And the question they posed it was, okay, so if you had two cups in a room and Bob walks in the room and puts a marble under cup number one, and then leaves, and then Mary walks in the room and then moves the ball from under cup number one to under cup number two, where does everybody think the ball is, right? They were trying to get the large language. They were trying to see if the large language model would understand that Bob didn't know where the ball was because he wasn't in the room when it was moved. And it did. It understood that. So these large language models are frequently displaying levels of intelligence that are making a lot of very smart scientists think that intelligence might not be as complicated as we think it is. Okay. That people have also been bringing up the concept of, are these machines sentient? Are they conscious? Well, we don't really have a good idea of what consciousness is. But I've seen a lot of scientists who have been working with AI for decades say that, if I were to have seen a large language model like this 20 years ago, I would have definitely said it was sentient. I would have thought it was sentient. Nowadays, how do we know if something is conscious? Well, we really don't know what consciousness is, but we ask somebody. That's what a doctor does. Are you conscious? We ask them. It's really the only way we know. So they asked large language models if they were conscious, and they said, yeah, they were. Not everybody believed it, but there are some scientists who are starting to question that. Is this maybe the spark of that? Can computers think? And that can computers think is something that Alan Turing brought up back in the 50s. Alan Turing came up with the Turing test. The Turing test was, how are we going to be able to tell if computers are as intelligent as a person? And that Turing test was, they were putting a computer in a room and people in a room where somebody else couldn't see them, and that person was going to ask them questions via text. And if that person couldn't tell the difference between the person and the computer, well, then that means the computer passed the Turing test. Okay. Nowadays, some people believe that we've already passed that Turing test, that we can talk to machines and we cannot quite understand. Other people say, well, the goalposts have moved a little bit, because now that we're talking to machines in meaningful ways and having conversations, and they're coming up with logic problems and solving logic problems. Have we passed the Turing test? A lot of people say we've moved those goalposts, because nowadays we can kind of tell if we're talking to a computer if we give it a very complicated problem and it spits back an answer real quick. Okay, that's kind of like the opposite of the Turing test. We think, oh, well, a human wouldn't be able to answer it that fast, so therefore I'm talking to a computer. So they're also talking about, there was an interesting article. Let me see if I have a link to that. About humanity's last exam. I don't have a link to it. I'll put it a link. I'll share a link with everybody later. Humanity's last exam. And it was an article about how these scientists are having a hard time coming up with new tests to test AI to see how intelligent it is. They are frequently scoring very high in SAT exams and other PhD level questions and reasoning questions. So that is about what is going to happen because these machines are that fast. Is it going to replace a lot of jobs? It is probably going to replace a lot of jobs. I don't know how we're going to deal with that, but we've been dealing with that for a long time. I mean, as soon as these trucks start driving themselves across the country by themselves, we're going to lose a lot of jobs there. As a society, we need to try and figure this out, because jobs are going to be lost. I would really like to think that we could all use these tools for ourselves and work those 5-hour work weeks and still get as much accomplished. But I really have a hard time thinking that that's how it's going to be, how it's going to shake out. When it comes to keeping up on information, I recommend this book, Singularity is Nearer. This just came out. He wrote this in 2023. He says a lot in the book how, there's already going to be stuff if you're reading this a year ahead of time when it gets published that is already obsolete, and that is true. But this is a very good book to read if you want to get deeper into where this is going to lead into the future. He predicted that the singularity, I think he said it was going to be 2049, and when we talk about the singularity, what Ray Kurzweil is talking about is he's talking about when computer level intelligence becomes so advanced that it starts to integrate with us in meaningful ways. And if we look back in history, we are synonymous with technology, and we have been for 100 years now. Cars are everywhere. Our smartphones are stuck to our hands. When new technology comes about, it wraps itself around us, and it becomes part of us and part of society, if not physically, almost physically. And if you look in the news, there are already implants that people are testing in people's heads. The problem with that is, of course, that, well, you got to drill through somebody's skull to really get an implant, and that causes a lot of damage. So they are doing that with people who, are either paralyzed and need implants to maybe control a prosthetic arm, or maybe to control a mouse to be able to speak if they're unable to speak and stuff like that. There are use cases where they're thinking, well, in some cases, the little bit of damage we do putting these electrodes in somebody's brain might help the person enough that it's worth doing. So for more information, I would really suggest reading this book. Also, I learn a lot from science fiction. Science fiction writers and movies both, I think, do a really good job of trying to imagine what the future is going to look like with AI. Okay. And this is one of my favorite movies. It came out a long time ago, 2001. It still really stands up well as a movie. Stanley Kubrick started working on it towards the end of his life. He wanted to do it earlier, not long after 2001: A Space Odyssey, but he was getting sick and he was getting old. So he asked Steven Spielberg if he would help with that. And Steven Spielberg, after Stanley Kubrick died, produced this movie. I highly recommend this movie. It's really good, and I think it is I watched it again recently. I think it actually might be a pretty accurate portrayal of what some of these artificial intelligence questions are that we're dealing with right here. So anyway, back to Ray Kurzweil and what he meant with the singularity. He really thinks that by 2049, we're going to have ways to have nanobots, little itty bitty things that are in our blood that can integrate with our own neocortex and expand our own logic in our own brains millions of times over. And so our own cognitive abilities will start reaching a exponential growth curve, which, yeah, that's freaky, right? That is super freaky. But it's now. I think this is not something that our grandchildren need to worry about. I'm in my mid 50s, and I think I'm going to live to see a lot of these changes if I'm lucky. So some other technologies that are going to help with artificial intelligence and its growth. Right now, artificial intelligence is very energy intensive. It takes a lot of energy to power these chips. I don't know if you saw 2 days ago, the stock market crashed because China came up with an artificial intelligence model that used a lot less energy and a lot less processing power, but could still give some of the same results that OpenAI's new versions of ChatGPT were creating. So it crashed the stock market. I think NVIDIA NVIDIA stock lost $600 billion. I'm sure they'll regain some of that, but that is a big problem. Energy is a big problem. Two things that are really going to be helped by artificial intelligence, but also is also going to help artificial intelligence in the future is fusion reactors. There's been a lot of gains in working fusion ignitions, and that is, if you've seen Back to the Future, when Doc showed up at the end of the first movie and he had that little Mr. Fusion reactor in the back of his car. Basically, it uses the same energy that the power has from the sun. When you fuse atoms together, it releases a ton of energy. So what they're trying to do is it produces some radiation that dissipates really quick. So it is a clean form of energy and possibly a limitless form of energy here on Earth if they can really get fusion reactors working. And they're making great strides. And a lot of scientists say it's not if, it's when. They know it's going to come. Artificial intelligence is going to help that happen. Also, quantum computing is going to help as well. I don't know if you guys saw this article. This was maybe within the last month or two. Google came up with a quantum computer chip that did a task that they say would have taken 10 septillion years on a regular computer to complete. That also is hard to wrap our head around, right? Also, Google suggests that it borrowed time from other universes to perform that calculation. I don't even know what to say or think about that. That's a little out of my headspace, but that was quite an incredible thing. So let's talk briefly about how libraries are going to adjust to this. Okay. There is an article that I will share with you that Ray Kurzweil wrote about government employees. See if I can see this. And this motivated me a lot for this presentation. Government employees, rule number one, everybody thinks locally and linearly, while technology moves exponentially and globally. So I think we need to start thinking a little bit more globally and thinking a little bit more exponentially. There was a thread on the listservs that went around that I thought was a fascinating conversation. Had to do with misinformation and collection development. Now, I'm not a librarian, and I'm sure there's a lot of us in this thing today who are librarians, and many of us are tech people and who are not librarians. So this is going to give you, I hope, a little insight into a librarian's mind. There was this conversation on the listserv about collection development, and right away, one of my colleagues from Porter County Public Library chimed in and said, no, we don't put restrictions on collection development when it comes to accurate information. And that created a big conversation. The reason I bring this up is because, as you probably know, we have had a bit of a splintered media landscape lately that has been creating a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation. And I've seen that increase a lot lately. And I think artificial intelligence, which is just another form of media, is going to increase that. And it's going to increase it in an exponential way. Okay, I think it's going to boom. I think it's going to take off. And as libraries, how much do we have a responsibility in disseminating good information? Librarians are not fact checkers. And librarian after librarian in this thread on the listserv said just that. We are not fact checkers. We take information from fact checkers, right? A Million Little Pieces was not reclassified by librarians from nonfiction to fiction. It was done by fact checkers, okay? And that makes sense. But as for a distinction between a library and librarians. We are sitting on top of a collection that we do divide between fiction and nonfiction, which implies that we have a certain amount of, we are arbiters of truth a little. You say arbiters of truth to a librarian and they bristle with that. And I understand why. They're not arbiters of truth. And I think maybe a better way to think of this is that we are arbiters of media. Okay. How do we fight against misinformation and disinformation while simultaneously declaring that we're not arbiters of truth? Well, I have some ideas. And these ideas need to be fleshed out by us, by our profession, by librarians, and by tech people working in libraries. So I really think that we need to continue this conversation. Okay. All right. So as humans, we build tools. Our neocortex gives us the ability to adapt to situations without having to wait for natural selection to adapt for us, right? In nature, if you don't have a neocortex, you don't have a prefrontal cortex like that, then you have to wait for natural selection to give you a coat in the wintertime to make you warm, or give you venom to protect yourself or something like that, right? When mammals got a neocortex and we could learn, we could adapt in a generation and pass that adaptation down right away, then also we experienced a bit of an exponential growth curve as well. Biologists see an exponential growth curve going back through that as well. Interestingly, though, some of the tools that we create, when we create a tool, we can run faster than a cheetah because we can invent a car. We don't have to wait for natural selection to give us a coat in winter to give us warm, because we can invent textiles and wear those clothes. Some tools are considered cognitive tools. I'm going to show you really quick what cognitive tools look like. So the cognitive tools that also adhere to an exponential growth curve is language. When humans came up with language, a lot of things changed. Okay, it kind of was a technology that came out of us. Writing, the printing press made communication. So, I mean, before we wrote things down, people had oral traditions where they just had to memorize everything and tell the next generation. With writing, they could write it down, pass it down to the next generation without having to memorize it. The printing press made that information widespread. Okay, audio, video, radio, TV was another. Internet. If this looks familiar, these are all cognitive tools that mostly fall in the purview of libraries. Okay, so I think our media landscape is splintered. Axios has a very good article about this I will share on Quora. Shattered shards of glass, sometimes inside media's 12 splintered realities. Many people claim that the world improves with easy access to more information. Now, I thought that too. I thought when we all had our internet on our phones, we're just going to become smarter, but that doesn't appear to be happening. We are having problems wrapping our heads around that, right? My social media classes that I do for the public originally started out showing people how to post a photo or tag somebody or check your settings. And it's increasingly become how to keep from doom scrolling, right? How to not be absorbed by it and how not to be fooled by other people. So there's a historian, Yuval Noah Harari, who compared this to food. He said, we don't get healthier by eating more. Good information, facts, and data require great effort, expense, and expertise. So I think that we are arbiters of media, okay? And also on the listserv, there were people talking about how libraries and librarians are trained to reflect the community that they're in. And I understand that. That makes sense. How can we do that without becoming echo chambers? Because in a splintered media landscape, what that means is a lot of us are in echo chambers. It's leading to confirmation bias. It is hurting us as a society. And in technology, we have to take some responsibility for this. A lot of these tools that we thought on our phones were going to make us smarter and make things better, a lot of ways are not. Okay, so the technology sector has to rise up to meet this challenge. Libraries, I think, since we are arbiters of media, okay, and a lot of the cognitive tools that we have been building over the years are in our purview, I think artificial intelligence is probably top of the list for that as well. So we need to play to our strengths. We already teach patrons how to evaluate sources and what makes something credible or authoritative. Librarians don't fact check. Librarians aren't going to tell you what's true or what's not true. But you know, if a kid comes in and asks if the world is round or flat, we just tell them the world's round. We don't give them both sets of information. Say, go figure it out for yourself, kids. Librarians are not libraries. Libraries, I think, do have a certain amount of information or a certain amount of responsibility for keeping the information relevant and having these different types of media not be detrimental to society. So what I think we need to do going forward is I created a spot on Quora to keep this discussion going. I'm going to post all these articles that I talked about on Quora, and it's going to open it up for question and answers. If anybody wants to contribute on Quora, let me know, because I look forward to all of us discussing this because changes are coming fast. I'm guessing at a lot of the stuff. Most of us are. We don't know what the future is going to hold. But I would much rather have us, librarians, tech people in libraries, people who work every day with a service motive, not a profit motive, be at the forefront of these changes. Because if it's not us at the forefront of these changes, it's going to be politicians, it's going to be marketers, it's going to be algorithms, okay? It's going to be influencers. Those aren't necessarily who we want deciding the future of all of these cognitive tools. I think it needs to be us. So let me show you really quick the link to Quora, where I'm going to put this stuff up. Okay, so the link is Public Libraries in the Age of AI at Quora.com. I just created this for a place for all of us to get together and talk. So if you could please get on and contribute, that would be fantastic. Promote regular media literacy training. This goes to the IT people in libraries out there. I think that's very important. Also, it's very important that we all work with these AI tools regularly. Working with them on a regular basis is going to keep us abreast of how they work, how they can help, how they can hurt. Okay, and I really think that we need to be. Also, I promote mindfulness in my library, and I think that is something we should also promote because mindfulness can help set healthy boundaries when it comes to media. It can tamp down emotions. But overall, we need to find balance. I understand librarians are not arbiters of truth, but I believe that libraries in general are arbiters of media. And so that is all I have. I'm going to turn this back over to Nick to give a few minutes on, and I ran over a little bit. I apologize for that. I'm going to turn this over to Nick to give some examples of how you can keep up with current events in this very fast changing landscape. So go ahead, Nick.
All right, so give me just a moment while I share this. So as Mike mentioned, AI changes very rapidly. So even with the changes in regards to intelligence, like Mike was mentioning, the latest model O3, they're flirting with artificial general intelligence and growth is exponential. So honestly, using traditional media to stay current with AI is not that effective, unfortunately. I personally like to use YouTube as my main resource. I listed some of the YouTubers that I follow. I generally find small YouTubers to be a little bit more helpful, and the AI space is still pretty new. So there's not really like massive YouTubers that are covering AI in depth right now. But there are some larger sources. I watch Tech Linked and The Verge for a lot of stuff. But some other ones, I can't think of. I think Wired also has a YouTube channel. There is one called Cold Fusion, but in general, these are the YouTube channels that I watch. The most up to date, even though it is controversial, is going to be X. You'll find out when you look at the AI space, most of the media and developments are actually just pulled straight from X. This is because a lot of the companies are very active there and they'll post their developments and updates there. A lot of the creators and things like that will post, things that they believe are trends in the space. So, like I said, I don't personally use X, but I'm just mentioning that the fastest and most up-to-date source is going to be X for AI developments. These are some more traditional tech news sources: TechCrunch, Ars Technica, and Wired. I believe that Wired also has a traditional magazine as well. A couple podcasts related to AI are AI Alignment and Hard Fork. There are some newsletters. I have two, The Batch and DeepMind Digest. And to find AI updates for the professional world, there are several blogs on LinkedIn that I follow that may be relevant. So I think you're still muted, Mike.
I was. Thank you, Nick. Okay, so I'm looking through the questions really quick because it's 10:01 and we're running out of time. I have more than one person bringing up a book called Clara and the Sun by Ishiguro, and I did read that book. That is, I agree, that is a good book to read on artificial intelligence. There's yes, we will have the slides. Lacey will be posting the slides for these. If there are any other questions that we don't answer, I'm going to go over to Quora. If you would like to join us over at Quora, I looked into a lot of different places that we can maybe have an interesting discussion. I use Quora a fair amount, so I think that's probably going to work out for us. We don't have to keep it there. But I will also try to post any questions that I can. There's a lot of stuff in here, so I don't think I'm going to be able to get through it. But good morning from Crown Point, Jacob. Oh, hi, Jacob. Great. A lot of my colleagues too. Okay, great. So thank you so much. That is all I have. I'll turn it back over to Lacey. Thank you, Lacey.
Thank you guys so much. So yes, in the follow-up email from me, we will have a copy of the slides. There will be a link for the Quora. There will be a copy of the chat and your LEUs. So don't worry, you don't have to like feverishly write anything down. We'll have all of that stuff for you. And if there was any questions, I only really had one that I wrote down was about how to sign into the account to communicate on Quora. I think that was one of the ones, the only really big question I saw, but everything else, if there's anything else that I see later that would need to be addressed by Mike or Nick, I'll get that answer for them, and that'll also be in the follow-up email. So
you can share my email on that follow-up email as well.
Okay, absolutely, I will.
Okay.
So I'm gonna, but yeah. So thank you so much for a lot of really great information. So AI, like you said, is really just kind of taking off and growing. And so I think that's a lot of information that we need. So I want to thank you guys so much for that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lacey. It was good to see you again.
You too. Yeah, always. And I'm going to go ahead and just end I think we're all done. So like I said, I'll be following up with everybody by next week. And I'm going to go ahead and end our session. But thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.